amongst other organizations, joined others in the Austin area. And we're here to welcome some folks from the city and the county to talk to us about weather events and how prepared Austin might be for the future. And so I will go ahead and introduce the panelists, and Andy Brown is right here and can be here shortly. But that way we can move right along. And each of the panelists will have 8 minutes to give a presentation of what they're doing to address communication between various entities and their people. And then the league has put together a couple of questions that I have given them in advance to address as well. And then we'll have Q&A from the audience. And so without further ado, I will introduce each of the panelists here today. And I hope you don't mind that we will videotape this evening, just so it's shared on our website. There are several folks who mentioned that they don't drive at night, for example, and people have conflicts of various kinds. So it won't be a professional production, but
It looks professional.
So,
did you have a
Yeah.
I think what it is.
Louder?
now, okay.
Louder.
I have hearing aids, so I tend to get more to it. So I'm going to start with Carrie Stewart, Ollie at the other end. Carrie Stewart is the Wildfire Division Chief with the Austin Fire Department. In 2019, CoreLogic published a wildfire risk report. Austin ranked 5th among the top 15 metropolitan areas with the greatest wildfire risk, just below 4 of California's population centers. Through its wildlife prevention program, Ms. Stewart and others in her division offer tips to communities and individual property owners on how to reduce wildfire risk. And I can tell you that Lakewood Homeowners Association asked them to come to speak to our whole community about what to do to keep our homes, and we now have an arborist that is taking care of because Lakewood is designed the way it is, it has a lot of green space that is unprotected and unmanicured, and with the trees that we just had, we have a lot of work to do. Lisa
Joanne?
Martin, excuse me.
The BCP is being worked on as I speak.
Yes.
There are people all over the BCP taking up, there's thousands of dead trees that are on the ground, just all kind of fuel. So we thank whoever's been doing that.
Let's see, who is next? Selena, she is president of the Austin EMS Association. She served as the captain of Austin Travis County EMS since 2020 and is a registered nurse. Austin Travis County EMS provides 911 emergency medical responses to citizens of Austin and Travis County, serving the population of over 2.2 million people in a surface region of over 1,000 square miles. Everything they do is about service to patients, their family, community, and members of the department. Next is Ken Snipes. And Ken Snipes came to Austin in 2019 as director of the Austin Resource Recovery, and now serves as the director of Austin Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. HSEM plans and prepares for emergencies, educates the public about preparedness, which is why he's here tonight, develops volunteers, manages grant funding to improve Homeland Security and public safety capabilities, coordinates emergency responses and recovery, supports planned events, and works with public and partner organizations to protect our whole community when it needs them the most. Next is Lisa Martin, and Lisa Martin is the Deputy General Manager and Chief Operating Officer of Austin Energy. Ms. Martin joined Austin Energy in 2010 and has served in several engineering and compliance positions related to grid operations, transmission and distribution, generation, cybersecurity, battery storage, distribution energy resources, and technology strategy. Prior to joining Boston Energy, she worked in power and gas origination and energy markets for Southern California Edison. And last but definitely not least is Judge Andy Brown, who has served as the Travis County Judge since 2020. County Judge presides over the Travis County Commissioners Court, which oversees the county's $1.4 billion annual budget, acts as the county's chief administrator, and is the director of emergency management for the county. Since taking office, Judge Brown has significantly increased resources to historically underserved communities, including starting a mass COVID-19 vaccination effort, prioritizing communities of color. During Winter Storm Uri, Judge Brown directed additional food, water, and utility support for the hardest hit areas of Travis County. Judge Brown focuses on investing in mental and behavioral health to help people receive care outside of the jail system, improving access to affordable housing, increasing transparency and community participation in county business. Before taking office, Judge Brown helped create the Sobering Center Austin to serve as an alternative to jail for intoxicated people. Started a successful law firm and served on local boards and commissions, and he grew up in Austin, so knows the city and county well. Thank you all for coming today. And the way, and what I will do is to begin with Stewart and to talk a little bit about wildfire prevention. And she has also brought some literature that I would encourage you all to pick up on your way out. It's quite fascinating.
Good evening, everyone. Carrie Stewart with the Wildfire Division for the Austin Fire Department, and our office focuses and is organized under the National Cohesive Strategy for Wildfire Preparedness. So that means we have folks who are dedicated to fire-adapted communities and educating the public, fire-resilient landscapes, and working with our city partners to help reduce fuels and increase our mitigation work in the city, and then effective firefighting also. So to start with fire-adapted communities, like Joanne mentioned, we have kind of bumped up a little bit, so we're number 6 in the country now, not number 5. But we're ranked number 6 for the highest number of single or multifamily residences with moderate to very high wildfire risk. So it sounds like a pretty astounding statistic for us to be ranked number 6 and number 1 outside of California. But it doesn't mean that there's nothing we can do. So that's why our fire adapted communities folks exist. So we operate the city and county under a community wildfire protection plan. That is slated to be updated in 2024. But that just kind of gives us an outline as a city and a county for what we're going to do across our landscape, city and the community, to just reduce our wildfire risk and to manage that risk. So we know that we can't eliminate all of the risk, but we want to be able to live with wildfire. We know that it's a natural part of our landscape. We have good fire and we have bad fire, so we want to minimize the effects of the bad fires, the unplanned fires that we might have in our area. So we also have a wildland urban interface, or WUI code, in Austin. If you're not familiar with that, it came around in 2020 is when it was finalized. But that just helps govern, it's another building code, but it is specific to our interface, that interface being where our homes and our green spaces intermix, or they come together. So we have our WUI code to help with remodels and with new construction, to say that those, if you're within 150 feet of 45 square miles or 45 acres, not square miles, acres of parkland or wild space, that you will have building construction, remodeling that is wildfire resistant. So they help you minimize your chances of igniting in case of a wildfire. We also have several resources with our fire adapted communities that folks can look for. So if you were to look up our ATX Wildfire Hub, that's dedicated to our Wildfire Coalition in Austin and the Austin and Travis County area to just kind of give you all things and information about wildfire preparedness and how to mitigate your area, your home, your community against wildfire. We also have an Austin area Firewise Alliance, and that is made up of all of our Firewise communities. So Firewise is a national NFPA program that's dedicated towards creating communities who have been very thoughtful in their planning and their preparedness for wildfire. So that means they've gone through and they've either spent so much money or so many man hours every year to maintain and create that Firewise status. So they've done, like after the recent storms, they've done cleanup days, they've created shaded fuel breaks in their communities, or other activities like that that helps them achieve that Firewise status. And then they have to put in so many hours every year to maintain that status. But that Firewise Alliance is dedicated, it's bringing those folks who have created those Firewise neighborhoods or communities together on a regular basis to talk about any challenges that they're having and to help them figure out anything like that. And then the goals for home hardening or for mitigation in our communities are for several reasons. One is to simply prepare your home, your surroundings, your community in the event of when we have a wildfire. We know that we'll have more wildfire events in the city. Watching our heat severity this last summer, we had a very active wildfire season in Austin and our surroundings. Some of the worst or the most intense activity that we've seen since 2011, the fuel conditions that we had, we were very dry. Our fuel moistures got very low. We had higher heat. And our NFDRS, that's the signs you see with the arrows outside of all of our fire stations. So that's the National Fire Danger Rating System. So we stayed at very high for a long time this summer. And so that's some of the worst conditions that we've seen since 2011 when we had the Bastrop fires and Steiner Ranch and those other events in our area. So we do, that fire adapted communities work is to prepare our surroundings. So we do know that we kind of expect that those more intense wildfire seasons will be kind of a new normal for us in our area. But we want folks to focus on hardening their own homes so that fire adapted communities work is geared towards that. So preparing your community. Also, when we do the fire adapted communities work and the home hardening, it helps provide spaces for our first responders to work as well. So if you have made your home as hardened against wildfire as you can, when first responders, whether it's police, fire, or EMS, have to come in during a wildfire event, you have made that space overall safer for others and first responders to work in as well. We also want to have that defensible space so that if you had to protect in place, your home is better protected against wildfire, and also it's a defensible space for our first responders also. So we want to be able to, if our first responders have to stay in an area when a wildfire comes through, maybe they can dip into your home and use that as a defensible space or a place of refuge. Even if everyone else in the community or in that area has evacuated, that still creates that defensible space that's a safe haven for our first responders also. It also helps us reduce the risk from embers in a wildfire as well. So one of the main reasons that homes catch on fire, like upwards of 75% reasons why homes catch on fire in a wildfire, is from ember casts. So that's going to be just flying brands of embers that are going to be blowing in the wind that can reach up to 1.5 miles away from where the actual wildfire event is. So even if your home is not right next to that area that has caught on fire or is spreading, if you're 1.5 miles away, that fire can still impact you in your area. So we do want folks to focus on hardening their own homes. And what that looks like with some of the literature we brought, we've got this Ready, Set, Go guide. So this is kind of all things preparedness for a wildfire. So thinking about your ready state, that we want you to have prepared your home, be ready for that wildfire, talk to your family, have a go bag packed, and just be ready in case. So that's kind of our normal state. And then we have set. So the elevated conditions that we had this past summer, we kind of stayed in that set status for weeks. That's not necessarily normal for us, but we wanted people to be aware that we had higher severity in our area. And then go would be the state if we got to where we needed to evacuate because similar to Cedar Park and the fire that they had up in Cedar Park. If they needed to evacuate, that would be the time that we want you to listen to first responders and understand that you need to go and get out of that area. So fire adapted communities is the main thing for a group like this that we want to talk about, hardening your home. That also looks like making sure your gutters are clean, that your siding is in good repair, your decks are in good repair, that you don't have lots of leaf litter around your home. Anywhere that embers could collect on your property, that's where we could start, where a fire could develop. So we want you to really focus on your own property and hardening your home.
Thank you very much.
Yes. I think there's a question.
Can we take questions?
Excuse me? You can have questions at the end.
At the end, thank you.
Yes, but if you need something to write on, I can give you a piece of paper so you can remember your question. I know what.
I remember, thank you.
My name is Selena, and I'm president of the Austin EMS Association. I've been with Austin Travis County EMS as a paramedic and captain since 2012, so I just passed my 10th year. I also, because of the city's ability for tuition reimbursement, I got my bachelor's in nursing, and I am also a nurse in Del Seaton Surgical ICU. And when I think about emergencies and preparedness, I think back to the pandemic in 2020 and also obviously the ice storm, two of the big emergencies that we've seen. And the biggest thing that I know is that everything was a surprise to us. During the pandemic, people started calling 911 because they had a cough, and it sounds ridiculous now looking back, but people would literally call 911 and be like, I have a cough, do I have COVID? You need to take me to the hospital. And we realized what we were doing is we were taking people to the hospital that probably just had a cold or something else, and we were potentially getting them exposed to COVID in the hospitals. Or if they did have COVID but it wasn't severe, we were taking them to the hospital to expose other people. And so what we really thought about doing is adapting the way we do EMS. What y'all probably think about EMS is you call 911, somebody picks you up and takes you to the hospital. But in today's day and age, it's so much more complicated than that, and we can do so much more to be better stewards of resources, of the tax money that y'all pay in, and actually do the right thing for the community, because not everybody needs to go to the hospital, as it turns out. So what we did is we had a specialized hotline, the paramedic hotline, and if somebody called in with COVID-like symptoms, they would get rerouted to this hotline. And it's nobody's fault. At the time, I think the understanding of COVID was very low. If you remember, people were putting like bags over their hands and, wiping down groceries. So information was very low and bad. And so this paramedic hotline that did have all the cutting edge research and understanding about symptoms and what required hospitalization, you would actually get routed to this hotline. They would do a triage. They would ask about certain symptoms that would mean that you should go to the hospital or that you could stay home. And it was really successful in keeping people out of the hospital when they didn't need to be there, whether or not they had COVID. And that program has continued after the pandemic, and now they triage low priority calls. Healthcare is very unreliable and unaffordable. And Texas has taken away Medicare and Medicaid for a lot of people. And so people call 911 because they don't have the resources to really get primary care. And so this advanced triage line actually will hear if there is a really low acuity call. So for example, I can think of two calls off the top of my head. I went to a call where somebody stubbed their toe and they were in pain, but they didn't even have any, a few dollars to take the bus. They didn't have a smartphone, so they were used to just anytime they had any medical need, calling 911. And so we were able to actually, instead of having an ambulance go out, we were able to have a community health paramedic go out and say, here's how you sign up for MAP, and here's how you sign up for Cap Metro Cap Metro Access, and they can just come pick you up and take you to primary care, and next time you can set up an appointment and go to a clinic instead of the ER to get your medical care taken care of. We also had somebody who called us because their toilet water bowl kept on running, but they were paralyzed. So, what were they going to do? They didn't have anybody else to call, and that's no fault of theirs that they have no other help in their life or resources. And so normally we would go and, be woken up at 3 a.m. and be very sad about life and fix the toilet situation and grumble but be nice and then go home or go back to the station. But now we can call our community health paramedics. We can set up an appointment so that they know that they can have home health, that there are resources that they can call for those type of non-emergent needs. And so this hotline is also very, very active during emergencies. And I think that's the most important part that's relevant to this conversation. So during the ice storm, I remember, if y'all remember, this 2021, it was Valentine's Day weekend. We knew that the roads were going to freeze. We are very EMS, fire, police. We're very accustomed to dealing with roads freezing. We know that people are going to get in wrecks. We know that we use this yellow tape if cars are trapped, so that we don't have to go to that multiple times. But what we obviously could not anticipate, and nobody in the community could anticipate, is that the power would go out for so much, and then that the water infrastructure would also go down. And so what we learned is that a lot of disasters are very unpredictable, even if you've seen something similar before. And so how do we really have the flexible resources that we need? So this paramedic hotline, really everybody came in. They basically just slept a few hours in one of the offices and would go right back to work. And they were coordinating care for so many people. A lot of people take great medical care of themselves, but need electricity to do that, whether they're on oxygen concentrators, home dialysis. But when that's not available, we were able to really connect them, take them in smaller vehicles, because our ambulances also couldn't get to a lot of locations because of how bad the ice was. They were able to coordinate care and get them to places where there was just electricity so that they could charge their devices. We had a bank of chargers, and we would actually just deliver them into the community. We would take a lot of folks experiencing homelessness to the warming centers, and we even coordinated things like, I don't know if y'all remember, some of y'all might have experience with folks that are on dialysis, but some of the centers closed because of the electricity, because of the water, and because people couldn't get to them to staff them. And so we actually came up with a medication plan that would buy folks just a few days. And I remember there was a news story about it that came out about us providing this emergency medication treatment. And one of the comments from a paramedic from somewhere else was like, or a doctor was like, I can't believe they're doing this. Like, this treatment is basically useless. It only buys them a few days. And we were like, literally, that's all we're trying to do. And so Travis County actually just last week also is investing in this hotline too, to expand it. And we know that this team is going to be really integral to responding to emergencies. And it's also really robust in having a list of vulnerable populations that have electricity needs, have other types of needs that will need to be checked in on in emergencies. And so we're expanding programs like that in order to keep everybody safe in a medical way.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Ken Snipes, and I'm with Homeland Security and Emergency Management. And I'm happy to be here with esteemed colleagues and panel members. I would say, with respect to winter storm events and extreme weather events in general, the responsibility of Homeland Security and Emergency Management is to lead and coordinate responses for the city. And so sometimes that entails working across the city, but also we reach outside the city to our external partners in other counties. As our structure is currently set up, we are partners with Travis County, and so Travis County OEM is a team that we work with every day. So we're staffed at the same facility at our CTEC facility, which is our combined, I'm forgetting the name of the place, Technology and Communication Center. I've been there since June of this year, and interestingly, Joanne mentioned that I've been here since 2019, and when I came here, people told me, well, Austin doesn't have all kinds of crazy weather like you might have seen. And I said, well, great. And then shortly after that, we had Winter Storm Uri, we had Winter Storm Landon, and then we had Winter Storm Mara. And so I don't know that I agree with Austin doesn't have crazy weather because we've had quite a bit. But the thing that we've been really pushing is education. And we're talking more and more with the public about the ways that they can prepare themselves. As a city, we have a limited number of resources, and so we want to make sure that people understand what they can do. Because we haven't had a lot of, I guess, extreme weather events historically, the city hasn't prepared for those, right? So we haven't, and when I say that, it's just not a conversation topic for us. With Winter Storm Uri, you all may remember, we saw extremely frigid conditions for a very long time. I don't remember the number of records that we shattered in that event. But the issues with that, I think, caught a lot of people off guard. But with respect to how we prepare, one of the things we've asked people to do is let's look to our neighbors to the north of us that do experience extreme cold weather events. And as we've started to do that, some of the things that we've noticed is that, for example, in the southern tier of the United States, water lines are buried pretty shallow, right? They're not very deep at all. And in comparison to that, if you live in Wisconsin or Michigan or Ohio, they're really buried deep, right? So that they don't freeze. And so while we may have historically been caught off guard by our pipes freezing, we shouldn't, right? If we're gonna see those types of weather events, they're gonna freeze because our water lines aren't very deep here. There previously wasn't a need to bury them very deep, but now there is. I'm relying on my background in utilities here, so.
Sounds good.
Okay. But the main thing for us has been pushing out education into our community, making sure people understand what they can do, what the resources are, how to prepare, with a huge focus on just being better neighbors. In some instances, we kind of recognize that we've gotten away from knowing our neighbors. In most cases, we say now, most people barely know their next door neighbors, and they usually don't know their neighbor's neighbor, right? And so one of the most important things that we can do to expedite response is to be active in our communities. If you call, maybe not Carrie's team, but if you call one of us to respond to you, it's going to take a while, right, during an extreme weather event. And the closest responder may be your next door neighbor. So if your toilet is leaking and you're looking for help, maybe it's one of your neighbors that can come help you with that, as opposed to taxing our EMS services or our fire services with that type of call. And so we want to make sure people are understanding, the importance of being familiar with your neighbors and knowing who in your community may need additional support or may need additional help, and being there for them. In support of that, one of the things that we've done is we've created a new training program. It's a 3-hour training that helps people understand the things that they need to have in their home so that they're prepared, which lends the ability to go out and help your neighbors. So that's going to be a huge focus for us. As a result of historically Austin not having a lot of extreme weather, the staffing wasn't really a priority. And so to address that, recently we've gone on a hiring spree. We've hired quite a few people for our PIO teams to make sure that we have the ability to get information out quickly. One of the major focuses for us in a pivot is speed of response. And so what we want to be able to do is move information out to the community as quickly as we can. And so having more people on staff that are taking that role on helps us move information quickly. And so that's been something that has been a huge focus. Our marketing is also an extreme focus for us, just to make sure that we're pushing messaging out well before the winter events or well before the wildfire season takes place, so that we're constantly thinking about what we can do to be ready for these extreme weather events that take place. Another area of focus for us has been training. So that's been a huge issue. We've started with training that includes our elected officials. It includes our city departments as well. And then we're also focusing on, as I said, to make sure that we're pushing training out into the community. We're asking everyone to make sure that you take the time to go to our website for warrencentraltexas.org to sign up. That is where you can get alerts directly to your phone to help you know what types of weather events may be coming our way. That is something that we've kind of struggled with over the years. to know that, to help people understand what they may be facing in terms of flooding events or wildfire events or extremely cold events. So OneCentralTexas.org is our website that we're asking people to go to for that information. We've also launched our Ready Together training program. I talked a bit about that, which is a 3-hour training for community members to help them understand where they can, what they can do to be prepared. We have a number of community engagement specialists that are partnering with our nonprofit organization, the partners. We're leveraging their ability to connect us with members of the community that we might otherwise miss, and that's been a really good opportunity for us. We are having more training and exercise sessions, and we've started with exercise in our own shop. So right now at Homeland Security, one of the things that we do is every other Wednesday now, I don't know if the staff likes that, but we're going through drills and exercises right within our shop. So that's been a great opportunity for us to really push some of our own messaging right in-house to make sure that we test the theories that we're working from. So you can come up with a plan, but unless you test that plan, it's hard to know if it's going to be effective or not. So we're doing what we can to make sure that that's happening. And then we're doing exercises broader scale as well. Over the past couple of years, we've done a winter weather exercise in December, and that's been something that we will continue and that we're really working towards pushing citywide. So with that, I think I'm out of time.
Is
We'll have
that,
more time later.
can I just ask, is that one, the number one Texas?
Oh, W-A-R-N, Warren.
W-A-R-M?
N.
Like a
Yeah,
warning.
Warren.
Warning. Warren
Oh,
Central
okay, I'm
Texas.
sorry, my ears are not working.
Sorry, my apologies.
Lisa.
Yes, good evening, everybody. Lisa Martin with Austin Energy. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. When we talk about extreme weather, Austin Energy as a public power utility has a lot of different types of weather to consider. Wildfire, extreme heat, drought. Tonight I'm prepared to focus mostly on winter since that's what's coming around. And you know, Ken mentioned the February storms of 2021 and 2023. From an electric utility perspective, they had very different causes. But from a community perspective, they both resulted in extreme long duration power outages that affect our community in the same way. And so the solutions to those types of issues can be different. However, the preparedness work that we're doing now does help prevent and prepare for both of those types of situations. So tonight I want to talk to you about how the utility is preparing for winter. I want to talk a little bit about infrastructure, and then I want to talk about the people side of things, and not only people internally within the utility, but people in the community such as yourselves. And so the infrastructure part of preparing electric utility for winter focuses first on the power plants, making sure that they're weatherized and winterized. What that means is we install and or make sure that our heat tracing is working. Heat tracing is essentially, if you imagine like the inside of an electric blanket, it's got a wire in it, right? So we take that wire, we run it along our infrastructure, anything that could freeze, that's outdoors, it's susceptible to cold temperatures. We have custom-made warming blankets that we wrap around the pipes and around, again, critical components. It's quite a sight. Someone out there, it's like a quilter, making these specialized blankets for your power plants, keep it all nice, warm, and cozy. Put up wind breaks to make sure that wind chill doesn't become a factor. Insulated cabinets, making sure the heaters are working and the alarms are working. We stock up on critical supplies that we need to make sure that those power plants run during colder temperatures. As you can imagine, most of them are built for extreme hot temperatures, but now we have cold weather as well. We have to prepare there. We also, from electric utility, have to prepare for our substations. And so those are the fenced-in areas along the electric grid. They transform power from the transmission level, like really big power lines, to distribution level, which you see in your homes. In your neighborhoods, going to serve your homes and businesses. And so within the fence of that substation, we have a lot of equipment that we have to make sure is functioning to keep the power flowing along the grid. We're checking oil levels and pressures using infrared thermography just to make sure that everything is correct. And year-round, we do quarterly inspections in those substations, and then during the winter months of December through February, we're focusing on monthly inspections to make sure that everything within that substation is up and running. You may have noticed that I haven't talked yet about the actual cables, the transmission and distribution power lines. That's harder to weatherize, right? I mean, you can do some hardening, you can do maintenance year-round on vegetation and on the equipment as it fails or as it gets to be more and more aged. But in reality, the best protection for that type of infrastructure is making sure that our people are ready to respond. Because we have miles and miles of overhead and underground transmission and distribution power lines. And so I'm going to shift gears talking about what we're doing as a utility to prepare our people. And just like Ken spoke about citywide, Austin Energy is part of the city of Austin. And so we have also expanded our emergency management team. We are increasing our training and our drills, making sure that people feel prepared to respond, making sure our staffing plans and our on-call plans are up and in shape, and that we have appropriate training again for our staff and people. A lot of work coming out of the after-action report associated with the most recent winter storm in February of 2023. And so a lot of process work and such like that. The final point is looking more outwards to the community, to all of you. And so just like Carrie spoke about a campaign, Ken talked about outreach, Austin Energy also has a community outreach campaign. It's called Get Ready, Stay Ready. There are some flyers on that table over there, and it's really about knowing what to do in case of an outage, a power outage. It starts with making sure that you have a plan, that you know what your threshold is for how long you can handle being without power, so that when we can provide the best information we have to you, then you know when you need to activate and either leave to go find a hotel or a friend, or to go stay with, or if you can, weather the storm in your home. We have a priority of restoration, and we have tools like our outage map. We want to make sure that you understand that we are working as quickly and as fast, as efficiently as we can to get the power back on to everybody, but it does take some time. And so having each community member knowing what their particular needs are really helps the overall response. Get Ready, Stay Ready also talks about making sure that people sign up for outage alerts so you can stay informed about what's happening at your home, even if you've decided to move to another location during the duration of the storm, and then knowing how to use our outage map. And again, knowing there's lots of information within that campaign about various city and county resources where you can get information, such as Warren Central Texas. And then the thing I want to end on is to talk about a particular portion of our community that is vulnerable, year-round, but specifically during these winter events, and that's the medically vulnerable population. And Selena spoke about that a lot. Within Austin Energy, we know that some people are dependent on equipment in their homes that runs on electricity. And so we have a medically vulnerable registry, and during blue sky days, or when we're not in the middle of a storm, caseworkers from Austin Energy will work with those individuals who meet the criteria to essentially develop their own personalized plan. They can't wait for the power to get on. They have to know what their personalized plan is going to be and make sure they have their emergency contact people so they can activate as soon as they need to. And as we prepare to go into the winter months, our Austin Energy caseworkers are contacting the medically vulnerable, the folks on the medically vulnerable registry to make sure they remember what's on their plan, that they still have those tools available to them, that information is appropriate. And I think the last thing that's most important is to make sure that we have the appropriate contact information so that as we reach out abroad, across the community as a whole, that whether we're sending out a text alert or we are sending out an email, the Get Ready, Stay Ready campaign, again, switching back to that topic, helps to make sure that we have the information so we can get in touch with you and share the best information. So I will end there, and thanks again for having me.
Thanks. Ready? All right. So I'm Andy Brown, the Travis County Judge. Also, we've got another Travis County official here, Diana Mercado, our elections, and many other things. Our county clerk that just ran a great election for us. I don't know how many of y'all were were here during Uri. Okay, yeah. So I still just thinking back to what Ken was talking about and everything we went through there. Still not over that, but you know, we all want to have a great plan. And I remember that week, I think it was Sunday night, Monday night, when Eric Carter, who's the county's equivalent of Ken Snipes, called and said, well, there might be some like rolling blackouts, maybe some brownouts, things like that. And like, I don't know, 20 minutes later, power went out, and then it was out for 4 days, at least at my house. And I think for much of Austin and Travis County. No offense to you at all. Right, across the state, yes, across the state power grid. But then it just turned into, you know, ballooned into other things. For my current situation, I had some older parents that we had to figure out where to get them to stay warm. Little kids, same issue. We had to figure out how to stay warm with them. And just the intense cold, the difficulty of getting anywhere on the roads, the problems with water and everything, it was so intense. And I think that was a great example of what can happen in emergencies. And as much as we had prepared as a city and a county, you know, for years and years before that, I don't think anybody thought that it was going to be that set of circumstances. And so the lesson that taught me is that, well, there's a couple of lessons. One is that we just need to be ready to all work together. And the great part about CTEC that Ken Snipes talked about is this top secret location off of Manor Road, where the city and the county, other folks all go to coordinate any kind of emergency response. And through Uri, through the other events that we've had since then, it really is a wonderful example of government working together with each other, the city, county, state, others, and the community also. We could not have gotten through Uri without community volunteers. So one example of CTEC that I just want to talk about to tout it a little bit. So there's tables there, there's big screens up on the wall with traffic cameras and weather forecasts and things like that. And some city employees and county employees are sitting there. And there was an incident where one community that was not on Texas gas, they had a propane tank. It was like a community propane tank that served this entire small community. It was out of propane, and it was on like, I think day 1, maybe day 2 of of Uri. And we finally got a hold of Feral Gas. It was the company that could fill that. And they found a truck, they found a driver. They're like, okay, he's ready to go. They have to go to the airport to, I guess, get it from the main tank and then out to the community. But the roads were horrible, and he couldn't get there in the truck that they had. And so, luckily, like across the table, literally, was the head of Road and Bridges, and I can't remember what her name was, or the staffer from City of Austin Road and Bridge. And she figured out that she had someone kind of in the area that could spread sand on the road in front of this truck. And so because we were sitting next to each other, figured that out. And literally they went to the airport, met the guy with the feral gas truck, drove to the community where they were out of propane, filled up the tank, and that community had some warmth, which I think is a great example of a private sector, the government, everybody kind of working together in emergencies like they should. I think the thing that the county has done since then, and I think the city has also done, as you all have heard, a really good job, is trying to make sure that we are, from the very beginning, working with all of our community resources together to make sure that we're responding to people. Because like Ken said, the staff of the county's emergency management, the city's emergency management could not respond to everything going on in the county, even with the great EMS, fire, and police that we have. There's in Uri we had hundreds, thousands of volunteers that signed up to do things. So I think the more that we can do to let the community know that it's a group effort in emergencies is frankly the only way we're going to get through the fact that we're in a southern state that doesn't get cold that often, isn't really all that prepared for cold, but it's going to happen more and more. And so the way that we do it is working together. So the county's part of that is there's about 5,000 employees in the county. We have, I think, around 3,000 of those are in law enforcement. We also have Starflight that works really closely with Austin Travis County EMS. The county has road and bridge kind of departments too. The way that we get through these emergencies is, again, by working together. Some of the things that we have done since the last time, noticing some holes and things, is so when Uri hit and water went out unexpectedly, the roads were also frozen, so we couldn't get shipments of water very easily from other places. So we were working with TDEM, which is the state version of Ken and Eric, the state emergency management system. And there were really kind of 2 days where the I-35 was impassable, and so they couldn't get 18-wheelers down here with water. They ended up flying some in a C-130 eventually to the airport to get some water here. But that was a good lesson that we needed to have some more water on store locally. So we've got some, and we're trying to get to a point where we have a few days worth of water, at least for emergency responders. The state does have warehouses around the state that have emergency supplies. That means 2 minutes. Okay, thank you. But we couldn't access those last time, and their things weren't placed wonderfully. So a lot of that has changed and I think improved, so that when we have the exact same thing that happened last time, we'll be in a better spot. But the tough thing is we're never going to have the exact same thing that happened last time. Let's see. One other thing, I guess, that we learned so we don't really have the same chemicals that people use up in the north to de-ice roads and things like that. We use a lot of sand. I think that same night, probably the reason I was talking to the city road and bridge person was because I was like, okay, the county has sand trucks, right? So we can do that as the county. So called the county, and one thing the county had not done in February 2021 was put plastic sheets over the piles of sand at the county. So we had piles of frozen ice blocks sand at the county. So that was another lesson. So we invested in plastic sheets at the county. And in the last ice storm that we had, all the sand was very usable. So a lot of lessons that we learned in that, but I think the key to all this, if you take one thing away from all this, sign up for Warrant Central Texas. The county uses it, the city uses it. It's a great place to get emergency notifications for whatever the weird thing is that we have to deal with as a community next. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate
The
it.
Warren Central Taxes website is on the back of this
Okay.
brochure, so it's on here as well.
Would you help me thank everybody for their because Judge Brown has to leave early, I thought that I would ask you all if you have any specific questions that are county oriented, that you want to make sure that you have an opportunity for him to respond.
Burning county questions that you have.
I'm Carol Olin. This is the county and the city. A question or comment. I live on the banks of Waller Creek in the city of Austin inside the floodplain. So when we have a heavy rain event, I watch the LCRA hydromet rain gauges and stream flows. And I also try to watch weather radar. In my experience over the last couple of years, is LCRA's hydromet has been a little bit unpredictable or unreliable, and I have made City of Austin Watershed Protection aware of that, and they acknowledge that when they have a heavy event, the amount of people that are checking hydromet increases, which causes the system to shut down. So I think they're addressing that. But the other thing is weather radar. Now on TV, we've lost weather radar off of cable TV. We just don't even have that service available to us anymore.
Yeah.
But the weather that's out there is they're showing past what has happened, and then they're projecting into the future. So we can no longer see what is actually going on in real time. And for me, that has been a disappointment because I don't really know what's going on with the weather radar because I don't have good access to it anymore. And then hydromet can be unpredictable, but hopefully they've addressed that. I just want to make you guys aware of my experiences.
Thank you. I'm meeting with LCRA soon about general water issues, so I'll ask them about that, see maybe they could increase the bandwidth, it sounds like, to the hydromet website. Maybe would help with that. And I didn't know, maybe y'all know, I didn't realize that I know on iPhones and the briefings that we always get, there's lots of screens of where the storm is going, but do they not show as she's describing anymore?
The timeline really.
Is that the thing? Okay.
So if you look at the timeline, it tells you what it is at the time that you're.
Okay.
Yeah, but Spectrum used to have it online. You could watch it 24/7, and they took it away.
And it's just where it is right now.
Right,
Real time.
in real time.
National Weather Service have, is there something for National Weather Service to get it?
I can check. They're so great that the National Weather Service has a San Antonio division, and now I guess they have a Travis County, at least Twitter handle. That is really amazing during emergencies. I'm happy to check with Ken. Do you know? If
No, that's what we use. This National Weather
Yeah.
Service is where we get our information from, and they're pretty accurate, as accurate as any of the weather services are. We've had some issues, but they weren't the only ones that got it wrong. But that's who we use. This National Weather Service.
We have an interesting situation that our son actually works in the building where the National Weather Service is located, but he's with NOAA instead. But I say the data all comes from one source. If you look at 3 sources or 3 distributions, they're all different. So they're all coming from the same data, which is always fascinating. Well, I know that Judge Brown has
Playing tag team on bedtime, so I gotta put my daughter to bed here in a second. But thank you so much. It's great to be here. And I know on number 2 is the question of the local state grid versus national. I'm gonna vote national on that one, but
Well, that's the next topic. The league put together a couple of questions that I asked the panelists to respond to. But in their opening remarks, they actually really coordinated that effort and answered almost all of the questions except for one. And the one question is for Austin Energy, and the question is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of Texas joining the national power grid? We know that there are 2 parts of the state that are attached to and outside of the Texas power grid, one being in El Paso and I believe the other in Panhandle. But the rest of the state is not. So that's our first question, and then I'll open it up for questions from the audience as well.
Yeah, so thanks for the question. Perfect timing for Judge Brad. So the part of the state of Texas that is its own electric grid is called ERCOT. And there are 2 other interconnections within the United States, the Eastern interconnection and the Western interconnection. To be completely honest with you, the decision about whether or not ERCOT connects with one or either of those interconnections is really a state and federal issue. There's nothing that the electric utility, the city, or the county could do to make that decision on its own. But I can describe from an engineering perspective, and maybe some people know this, maybe some people don't, there are some limited connections already. They use direct current instead of alternating current, and that does allow some power flow during extreme cases. Now, if we were to actually interconnect ERCOT with one or the other interconnections, it would require a great deal of work. It could create a great deal of cost, and it would mean that more energy could flow into Texas, but it also means that if something is happening on one of those other grids, that impact could also hit us as well. There are absolutely positively pros and cons. It is a highly political issue. From a regulatory perspective, there would be additional oversight. Building a transmission line or a power plant, for example, would have, instead of just dealing within our state government and the Public Utility Commission of Texas, some of that would have to go to FERC for approval, and there could be some market implications as well. So I think it would have to be analyzed in great detail, and again, I just want to end where I started. It's not something that any one of us individually
Please, the time is now 7:30.
could impact. It would have to be a state and federal decision.
Your Wi-Fi will shut down
Sorry.
in 20 minutes.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Tell me what I was going to say.
30 minutes, but we will finish. Actually. So if there are questions from the audience, make sure that there are questions, because we only have about 15 minutes left.
Okay, a question for Martin. Has the study been done that's weighing the pros and cons of connecting to the national grid? I mean, I understand the pros and cons, but has there really been a good study done that we can look and see, does this make sense, taking the politics out of the question?
No.
The honest answer is I'm not sure. I do know that there was some legislation proposed to change state and federal laws to interconnect. It didn't get very far within the state of Texas. That's not exactly your question, I understand. I'd have to do a little bit of research, but not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so it seems to me that that would be the best place to start, to have a committee with the education and the background to understand all this, and to get into the weeds, and then to come up with a conclusion. Because to leave it up to our legislators to decide, it's
It's a
scary.
lost cause.
Yeah.
Central Texas has probably the largest number of electric vehicles anywhere in the state. We were able to charge cell phones.
Yes.
Yes, we were able to charge cell phones for neighbors that didn't have it. We went to the car when we got really, really cold to keep warm and didn't have to worry about carbon monoxide. So, two-way vehicle to grid should be something that could be a high priority for these types of situations. And the county and the city should have vehicles that have batteries available that could go to somebody's house that needs a breathing machine or something and tie into their place. Unless of course Vermont is going to provide batteries for their entire electrical system so that people won't have to worry about that kind of thing. But I don't think that's going to happen in Texas. The legislature will probably disallow it. But anyway, what about two-way charging? There are thousands of kilowatts sitting out there that sit in people's garages all the time. They could be filled at night when wind power is cheap, and let it flow back into the grid to help us in these kind of situations, or really anytime we have high demand.
I appreciate the comments, certainly. It's always good to see you, Dale. Part of the vehicle to grid readiness starts with making sure that the electric vehicle manufacturers will allow it. For a long time, it was voiding warranties. And so I know that actually Nissan was one of the first ones that would allow us. Years ago, I was working on a battery storage project for Austin Energy, and we did a pilot vehicle to grid with Pecan Street. The cost definitely wasn't there. The equipment you needed to be able to take the power from the car and put it to the grid to transform it back from DC to AC cost almost as much as the car itself. Now you'll hear that the Ford Lightning has the ability to do that as well. It's also very costly. I was listening to some research. Maybe this is a little bit dated. This was maybe a year ago, where the Electric Power Research Institute was saying that all the different Ford Lightnings that have been sold, about 100 people across the country have installed the capability, right? So really, technology costs have to come down. Interconnection, interoperability standards have to increase. The technology has to mature a strong amount. In the meantime, we have to make sure that our distribution power grid has the robustness that it needs for that much power to be coming back onto the grid to then flow through the transmission lines back to the other, right? That's not the way that the grid is. It's not just built for two-way. And so there's a lot of work to be done, but that is definitely on the maturity roadmap of watching where things are going. And we're working towards it and readying it along with other members of the industry all the time.
And I also appreciated your presentation last night.
Thank you.
EUC about all the looking at
2
underground.
nights in a row, Dale.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Thank you, Austin Energy.
So I'm in a very active community HOA group, and a lot of these requests, like, oh, I have a medical vulnerable or power went out, and they're sharing information on Facebook, but when the power went out, a lot of that information wasn't available. So they have gotten together to try to provide each other emergency support. So is there specific information that we can do from an intake perspective to help you all does everybody have to individually register to be like a medically vulnerable person for, you know, power outages and such, or can we as a community, like the community groups actually help with this, gathering it more as like a trusted partner, they know us, we're their neighbors, that's.
Are you asking, was it Austin Energy Medically Vulnerable Registry in
All
particular
of
or
the
in general?
above. I mean, like, I would like to get like a volunteer corps that can do minor home repair, you know, they're CPR trained, you know. I have like wilderness first aid, that doesn't, it's not that necessary here, but it's more useful.
I have that too.
Yeah, so like, you know,
I'll pass it up to Selena in a second, but I'll just say at coautilities.com/go/MVR, and I can give that to you again after, is the website to go to understand the criteria and the resources that are available through the City of Austin Medically Vulnerable Registry. And that's probably the first place to start. I don't know if you have anything to add.
The only thing I'll say is if you, in the event of a disaster, and yes, I mean, I think a lot of people gave really great advice on how to prepare. From an EMS standpoint, we always say just make sure that you have, when you know that an extreme weather event's gonna come up, I think people are pretty good about going to H-E-B and stocking up on everything, but also make sure that you have a supply of medications, because we had a lot of people that ran out of their pain meds, certain other types of meds that then they could only go to the hospital for. But if you were to call 911 and you know you all had a situation, you could ask for the C4 line, and then they would actually be able to coordinate anything that y'all might need. If you're like a point person for or something, they can also connect you with when CTEC goes and has their emergency operations standing up. They can also connect you there too, but they definitely communities.
yeah, I went through like the Red Cross training system, so like I was a captain and like people knew to come to my neighborhood, but like I don't have that established here, that was in Seattle, so I would love to kind of build that core. But is there privacy laws that we might be violating to have like, who are the medically vulnerable people in our neighborhood or something?
Well, and you can also, so when you call 911 and you give an address, we sometimes have notes tied to those addresses. And so you can actually have notes tied to those addresses. So, you know, it's like this person has difficulty answering the door, please don't break in the door, there's a lockbox. And so we have that, so you can actually put instructions for certain residences if they have certain, and also like, we have a lot of people, this person has a very specialty medical device, if you're having any issues with it, call this phone number, for example. And so all those notes can be entered into our system. You probably remember that, yeah.
Okay. I'll just do like neighborly like wellness checks.
We'll have some time later to chat, so if there are other people responding.
Well, I was just going to say that speaks to the point that I was making earlier about being good neighbors and kind of knowing, you know, the people in your community who may have issues. I will tell you that there's a conversation nationally right now about lists in general as it relates to evacuations. And so we've had conversations with some of our partners, most recently, well, actually a while back I talked to one of the former fire chiefs in LA, and they were sharing their experiences with respect to getting lists. And these lists are sometimes protected because of HIPAA laws and things like that. So they shared that one thing that they would do to make sure that they could create a robust response for vulnerable populations is to connect with some of the rideshare companies or some of the ambulatory services. And we've been talking here in the city about how we do a survey of what we do have and combine those things to create a more robust perspective. Austin Energy has the medically vulnerable list. I just happen to know because I worked at ARR that they have a list similar to that called backyard service for those who can't get their cars to the curb. There's another list that we could combine to create a more robust response. And so that conversation is taking place, but I would say it's probably a little bit in its infant stages. But that is something that we're thinking about as well.
I would suggest making it a competitive process for a neighborhood HOA to go through a certification of like having the most like caring group of neighbors, and like they can go through all the training to provide. Sorry, I'm gonna stop talking.
There's another question.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for everything you do to keep Boston safe and respond to emergencies. The success of any emergency plan is, of course, that year on year, more emergencies don't come up. And so I have two questions. So the first one is there any publicly available information about the frequency and intensity of emergencies that have been happening over the last decade? And second is, what are the possible risks that are being looked at and by whom for the next decade or next 50 years for Austin?
Well, I don't know,
Probably Kenny's.
I know it's probably not.
The answer to your question is yes, we are looking and we are reviewing data. As I talked about earlier, we know that extreme events are happening more frequently. And so, like I said, in the past 3 years, we had 3 winter storms, 2 major storm events. And so I don't see that changing. And I think the main focus for emergency management is to make sure that we're preparing as a city to be able to respond to these events. And then we're preparing the community to be able to respond from their end to these events as well. I'll just tell you, like I came here from Seattle, so it's interesting that you mentioned that. But we were kind of, as we were diving into some of the complexities of responding to emergencies here in Austin, one of the council members asked me, why don't we respond to these items, these issues like a city like Miami? And I said, well, that's a great question, Councilmember. I said, Miami is about 48 square miles. Boston's about 48 square miles. Seattle's 84 square miles. Philadelphia is about 130 square miles. Austin's 320 some odd square miles, right? And so those are cities that we tend to think of as big cities, right? And Austin dwarfs those cities. And so what ends up happening is anytime that we're preparing a response, a needle in a haystack, when Lisa's crews and teams are trying to find that down power line, it's not a walk in the park. It's work to find those issues, right? And so it's work for all of us to respond and for all of our teams to cover the amount of ground that we have to cover. This is a very large city, and some of our planning hasn't grown as fast as the city has grown. And so we're starting to put those plans in place now and catch up to that. But that's a major issue with respect to planning in a city this size, is us finally realizing, I'm told Austin used to be a small city. I don't know when that was. But,
Whenever you moved here.
yeah, but this is a big city with a lot of complexities as it relates to the types of work that we're putting through.
This is not so much a question as it is a statement, and I would just like to thank all of you. The job that you guys are doing, putting in new programs, coordinating. I've been at CTEC and I know how impressive that is. That is so exciting, and thank you. And I would also like to say to the audience that these people are doing a fantastic job, but we have a responsibility ourselves. We have a responsibility to make sure that we're prepared and take care of ourselves, educate our neighbors, and help them when they need help. One of the organizations, and I think Ken's probably real knowledgeable about, is CERT. It's a community emergency response team, where people in the community volunteer, they get the training, and that they can work within their little individual community at times when emergency resources just can't make it to us.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. So many of us in this room are of a certain age. And when you're a kid, I have a small house, but it has a fireplace, and we had lots of wood. And I can remember watching MacGyver and saying, we have to get the MacGyver spirit here and figure out what we're going to do, right? And so we had a cast iron pot,
Please, the time is now 7:45. The library will be closing in 15 minutes. Internet stations will shut down in 5 minutes.
so so we made fried eggs, yeah, and I was able to make tea because I had an iron teapot. So preparedness is, is an important thing. We could get along for quite a few days with what we have. So help me thank you.